Welcome back to another episode of Is It Crazy or Is It God with Faith and
James. What's up, guys? What's going on?
All right, so I guess I should start off by asking you,
What's up?
how was your week?
Well, actually, my week is pretty good. This week, I learned not to be so hard on myself mentally and physically. And we all say we think we know what give ourselves grace is, but I'm one of those people that don't. Unfortunately, I'm pretty stubborn. I was one of those. What's the saying? I have a hard head and a soft bottom. One of those guys growing up, right? So that's kind of my weekend. I became rejuvenated after, I communicated that to you. And next week, back at it, waking up early. And I didn't stop my morning routine. I continued to work out, and it was just the time differential. I was still waking up at 6. I want to wake up earlier than that, so I'm going to shoot for that goal next weekend. I'm going to take it 10 days at a time and evaluate my progress during the week by establishing a checklist. So that's all. It's just goals that I want to complete for myself and habits that I want to establish. Mm-hmm. So that my week, besides that, my week went awesome. I'm blessed. Mm-hmm. I get to work from home. I have a beautiful wife. Nice place I live in. Nice animal.
Where is she?
Named Buttercup.
Buttercup will be around. As soon as she gets winded, we're starting filming.
Yeah, so it's cool. I'm blessed. I can't complain about anything that's going on in my life.
That's what's up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what's up.
How was your week?
My week was good. Also, I feel like I had a couple of breakthroughs there. With you talked about your 10-day. That's kind of like your 10-day plan. That's kind of like my whole planning theory and system. And so if you don't know, you should start following me on Yes, I'm a Unicorn. And
be prepared.
I've not been so great about putting up new content. I film new content all the time. Mm-hmm. Anyway, long story short, I need to get into that because I do feel like that's my deal. I feel like that's my gift, one of them. And I've really had some breakthroughs in that front this week. And just putting some pieces together, it's amazing what silence will do. And sometimes in situations where I can't have complete silence, like maybe I'm in the office or maybe there's some buzz around the house, right? Like there's a show on or someone's editing. That's fine. No, it is because that's life. But when I can't have complete silence, I'll turn on some soft jazz music or some meditation music or some classical sometimes and just whatever mood I want to be in. And I'll just zone out. And so through doing that and just kind of praying my way through this week, I feel like God was speaking to me. He was just showing me these different ideas. Certain things were connecting. I was having a lot of days this week where I would wake up with an idea that was really exciting. Like, oh, I got to get this down on paper. So I feel like that's something that happens when you are praying and you're being silent and you're trying to be obedient. I'm not saying that I'm super obedient, but I've been trying harder. And so I think God is blessing me with breakthroughs and even like my mental health. Like there's certain things that I'm learning about myself that are like, oh, that makes sense, and I just had some breakthroughs this week. So I feel good. I like to think that a lot of it has to do with the reading that we're doing because every week something gets revealed to us that's, even though it happened in BC, it still is relevant. And it's like, these are super instructional stories. So it's like, oh, I feel like sometimes I'll get something from what we read and I'll be able to apply it. And then when I apply it, it's crazy how things will just like work themselves out. But I
Yeah.
mean, we're talking about a week here. I had
Yeah.
a good week. I had some breakthroughs. So yeah, that's how my week went.
All right. Okay. Now let's get into it. So this week we read Genesis 25 through 34.
Yep.
All right, and we're gonna like how we usually do, and we're gonna break down the what happened between the verses. Then we're gonna ask a question, and we're just gonna discuss in our own interpretation. So right now we start with Genesis 25 through 26. A lot happened.
Mm, a lot is happening, guys.
Okay, Abraham remarried.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, his wife Keturah. Oh man, Keturah. I know. Andrew Coke's sister's name Keturah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, his older sister. Yeah, sorry, don't worry about that. Okay, Abraham's death, the birth of Esau and Jacob. Esau sells his birthright.
Mm.
That's interesting. And Isaac's adventures.
Yeah,
All
that's
right,
what
so
happened in 25 and 26.
25
In
and
Genesis
26.
25 and 26.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, what are some of the differences between Esau and Jacob physically as well as intellectually and spiritually?
you want to go first?
Man, yeah, I can
Okay,
go
go
first.
ahead.
So there was a struggle that God said that there will be two nations in your womb, and He said this to
Rebecca.
Rebecca. They're twins,
Jacob and Esau.
Jacob and Esau.
Esau. I don't know how to say it, guys.
Esau. Sorry, we'll say Esau.
I don't know how to say it. I'm just saying what I think. Go ahead.
Well, I'm gonna go with you. You're right sometimes. Anyway, so so two nations in your womb. Two people should be separated from your body, and this is Genesis 25:23. One shall be stronger than the other, and the other shall and the older shall serve the younger. Now, the difference I think between the two brothers, Esau and Jacob. Physically, Esau is like LeBron James. He's like Shannon Sharp. He's physically a big man.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, he's just born like that. As in the South, they say big boned, whatever, right? He's physically and towering. And then Jacob is like me. Not to say just an average guy. I think it's not. When I say me, I'm not discounting my physicality. I'm just saying I'm an average human being. That's it. It's nothing wrong being average. 90% of people are average. That's why the other
some people are like
specimens,
huge, right?
yeah.
Like, oh,
like
yeah.
like I mean, you're meant to. I mean, your physicality is big.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the difference. Intellectually, I mean, I gotta give it to Jacob. Jacob, I think, was the way that he. Hey,
I'm listening. You're telling you.
Right.
True.
So the way that after reading, the way that Jacob has moved in a certain way gives me just a sense of what happens when we're going to discuss of his intelligence, of how he maneuvers. And some people that are intelligent maneuver like this, unfortunately. And they get a lot of times what they want, the way that they maneuver.
Yeah.
And not to give up too much, but we're gonna discuss it further, but that's what I think intellectually. And spiritually, I think it was Jacob. And we'll get into that later, but I'll spoil it, because of Jacob's ladder.
Mm-hmm.
He dreamed of God, and doesn't really talk about Esau being connected to God spiritually. He seems like, And I watched a snippet of it, but it's talking about how Isu just was in the field all the time.
And
Always in
this
the
was what
field.
when you watched the
No, it's just a snippet of it. The Grace Digital
Grace
Network.
Digital
Just a
Network.
snippet.
Okay,
Just a
yeah,
snippet
yeah,
about Isu. I just really like shout out to Grace Digital Network. It's straight from the Bible. And it's usually a 15-minute clip. I just review it and it gives me some perspectives. I'm careful of what I watch and what I take in, but
yeah.
it seems to me, hopefully I'm not wrong, but what they're saying on the screen is what I'm reading. So it's
Yeah,
their
and I
own
mean, like,
interpretation.
that's the importance. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. That's
I was
cool.
gonna say, while we're on that subject, that's the importance of reading something for yourself, because I was actually listening to this funny podcast yesterday, and the host is a comedian, but he made a good point, which is a lot of times,
We can
especially when it
say
comes
it.
to
They're
the Bible.
believers, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but I just want to put. I don't.
Okay, I
Okay,
got you.
so
I
I'll
got
tell
you.
you because it was hilarious,
Yeah,
and
I'm
I
gonna
really
watch it next
thoroughly
week.
enjoyed it.
Yeah, yeah.
Kevin on Stage has a podcast where he is interviewing just people, and he had one that I saw with Jackie Ina, but he had this hilarious one with Jonathan McReynolds, and I literally was laughing so loud watching that. But it was just like it was wholesome, like it was funny. It was not, you know, I wasn't trying to not say their name because of anything other than just I was just mentioning it. But anyway, one of the things that Kevin on Stage had mentioned was how we just kind of take things for we don't go, it was like, especially when you hear something about the Bible, you just kind of take it like the truth. But yeah, that must be in there. Like, it's not really, a lot of times you don't really go back and look. So I think when you're talking about the Grace Digital Network, I think it's cool. So far we've been listening from the two excerpts that I heard, it matches what we read, right? But if you're taking something that somebody said or someone made a video of, even like this, and you don't have a frame of reference to know whether it's the truth or not, you should go ahead and do that. You know what I mean? Don't just take somebody's word for it. But anyway, I got off on a tangent there.
Yeah.
But
Just like, yeah, that's what we say.
also what's interesting is that there were a couple of points, at least one that I can remember distinctly, where my version of the Bible, which I'm reading the Amplified version, Joyce Meyer Amplified version, and James is reading the King James version. And we always have another version here just because we want to compare and see, make sure we understand what we're reading. So there were a couple of points, especially one that I'm thinking is that it's interesting how the wording can be different, and sometimes if I'm taking something literally, it's hard to differentiate what the actual meaning is when I'm reading the Amplified version. So, but most of the time, it helps me understand better.
Yeah.
Because James likes to read real fast out loud, and I'd be like, he can't possibly be taking this information in because he's just speed reading it out loud. And I'm like, wait. Let's go back and understand what just happened there. But in my version, I'll tell you specifically what I thought was weird. The wording of it. It was when we'll get to that later, but it was later when Jacob was going back to his land to meet his brother and all that stuff. But it was like they were saying idols versus goods.
Oh, yeah.
Idols
We'll
versus
get to
gods.
that. Yeah.
We'll get to that later.
Yeah.
My point is this: you want to just make sure that you're reading carefully and that you're understanding it, so that when you do seek another source, it should match up with what you already read, right? Anyway. All right. So speaking of the question, right, some of the differences between Jacob and Esau. First off, I got to go back because we ended off on Genesis 24 last week with a nice, cute little ending where Isaac and Rebecca are starting their lives together, and so cute. Then we come to see kind of like how Rebecca be just scheming sometimes.
She does.
It says, I went back, I want to go back and touch on something you said about she wasn't able to conceive at first until Isaac prayed for her.
Yeah.
And then once that happened, God blessed them with twins. Now, she started having some complications because they were kicking and fighting each other in the womb. And she went and asked God, like, what's up? And he was like, basically, there you have two nations in your womb. Oh, and they're starting to basically not get along right now. That's what you said, but I just wanted to go back and put some clarification on that, because it's like, Wow. You have two nations inside of you and they're already fighting. Also, I thought what was interesting is that Esau came out and he was big and hairy, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
and Jacob was grabbing onto his heel when he was born.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something significant about that, especially based off of what I now know about the way that they interact. Going into the question or the answer to the question of how they are different, Esau and Jacob. Yeah, Jacob is kind of schemy. He tricked his brother a couple of times. The first time he talked him out of Esau's birthright. He just went right up to him like Esau came out of the field or whatever after working or whatever. I think he's a hunter or something, but he came in, he was really hungry. Jacob had some food and he was like, Jacob, I'll give you this food if you give me your birthright. And it's like, who does that to their brother? But Esau went along with it, which is, I mean, I know he was hungry and everything, but it's like, that's pretty, he probably would have gave him the food anyway. And if he's so big, he should have just been like, my sister used to do to me, like, sit down.
Yeah.
Sit down, I'm taking this. So, anyway, shout out to Demeter Joe. But she was also very kind to me, and she used to. Okay, I have to say this since I said that. We used to go to the ice cream truck. I used to get snacks, and she used to get snacks. I would eat all my snacks, and she would save hers. And she would fold her bag up all neatly. It was weird. And then when it came time for her to eat her snacks, I would have eaten mine already, and I'd be like, "Can I have some of yours?" And first she would complain and be like, "You already ate all yours," and then she would share with me anyway. So, anyway, fun story.
Hey,
so we were not at all like Esau and Jacob. We were kind and loving to one another. No, but yeah, Jacob was obviously more intellectually, I don't say blessed, but he obviously could think his way through things a little bit better than Esau, else he wouldn't have given his birthright up, right? Spiritually, you bring up a good point. I hadn't recognized that, but yeah, we don't hear a lot about, or we didn't read a lot about Esau speaking to God. In fact, he got so angry at something Jacob did that he wanted to kill him.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that doesn't really sound like somebody who spiritually connected. Yeah. But so, yeah, physically, you already touched on that. Intellectually, we touched on that.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's who they are.
All right.
That's the differences.
Now we're going to get to some interesting... this is going to be some interesting things going on here. All right. So Genesis 27 through 29. Jacob steals Esau's blessing. Jacob had a dream, Jacob's ladder. We're explaining that he saw God and angels, and he spoke to God directly. And then Jacob marries Leah and Rachel. Now the question is, Jacob had to learn patience in the marriage game. What in your life requires patience?
Oh, Lord.
It's a deep one. This is good.
That's a deep one.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to start out with this because there's a couple of things that I wanted to touch on that is not a part of the question, but it happened in this area of the Bible, or in this section, rather.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about Jacob's ladder dream, so here's what happened. Isaac was going to bless his older son, which was his favorite, Esau, and Rebecca's favorite was Jacob. But so Rebecca was listening in on Isaac telling Esau to go out and do this thing, make this food for him so he can bless him, so he can receive a blessing from his father. Isaac, just like his dad Abraham, has been blessed. Like they're obviously blessed. Like they have livestock, like wherever they go, even though both of them be lying about their wives. It's wild how this is passed down. God still blesses them. And so basically Isaac was going to bless Esau. Rebecca heard about it. She did some old scheming with Jacob, and they ended up creating a scenario in where Jacob pretended to be Esau, took the blessing. Isaac was upset that he got tricked like that. Esau came back and he was super upset too, to the point where he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna comfort myself," I think it said, by thinking of killing Jacob.
He did say that.
I don't want to be near somebody who's comforting themselves thinking about killing me. So Rebecca, I actually think she made something up to have Isaac send Jacob away.
Yeah.
Now, here's what's interesting. After Jacob done conned and schemed, conniving, whatever the
Yeah.
word I was trying to say,
Deceptive.
he finds himself in a predicament. So he has to leave. He leaves the land, and he runs into Rachel.
Yeah.
So he meets Rachel, asks who her father is, and all this. He goes back. Now Jacob and Rachel, he wants to marry Rachel, so he has to ask the dad and everything. He actually made a deal with his dad that, like, I'll work for you for 7 years in turn for your daughter's hand in marriage. So he does that. They agree to it, and then Laban, I think his name is,
Laban, yeah, man.
pulls the old switcheroo and gives the other daughter instead of Rachel. Now, they said her eyes were weak or something like that, which I guess means that she wasn't as pretty as Rachel, because they distinctly said that Rachel has a nice form, she's attractive or something, right?
Beautiful.
But they didn't say that about Leah, and they ended up saying something about her eyes, which I don't know what that means, but it implied, I picked up that she obviously was not as pretty as Rachel. So Laban pulls the old switcheroo, gives him Rachel and gives Jacob Leah instead of Rachel after he done worked 7 years.
Yeah.
So then he's like, oh, just work another 7 years, you can have Rachel too.
Well, you remember he said it's customary.
So he basically lied.
Is married before the youngest.
But that wasn't their deal. So so this is how Jacob had to learn patience in the marriage game. Well, that's one of the ways. So he had to basically work 7 years for someone who he didn't think he was working for. Then he had to work 7 more years for the person that he wanted. And I feel like it was some real sister wivey type of thing happening. I mean, literally, they're sisters and they're both his wife. But they kind of had some competition. I'm sure it wasn't the most comfortable situation for him when they were kind of being competitive, right? Leah was having babies. She wanted to be loved. Rachel was upset that she wasn't having babies yet. They were kind of going tit for tat with their maid servants at some point.
Remember that Leah started getting pregnant because she thought that would make
him love her.
That would make Jacob love her.
So I think he had to be patient.
Yeah.
Because first of all, he had to work all these years just to get their hands in marriage.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is that once he got their hands in marriage, he was still having to deal with their father, who was kind of pulling a lot of schemes as well. Yeah. But I want to come back and talk about that later. Yeah. But so what is your take on
what in your life requires?
What in my life? Oh, I don't need patience. Man, everything. The places that I want to be are not necessarily like physical places, but where I want to be in my career, where I want to be with my businesses, where I want to be with my family, where I want to be as far as owning real estate and having livestock. Right? Where I want to be requires patience, because as we're learning, everything is really just broken down into habits. So being patient with yourself, being patient with myself is very challenging for me to say, if I have to do this so many times and I'm only on time number 2 or 3, when is this going to hurry up and happen so I can get what I want? That requires patience. At my job, for sure, I'm learning so much. And it's not something that I have a lot of experience in. I'm grateful for this opportunity, but I'm getting impatient with myself a lot because I want to hurry up and do things, and I have to go back and learn about them first and figure things out. So that takes me longer. That makes me so frustrated. I have to have patience with that. I have to have patience with a lot of stuff in my life that's like, it's wild. So
okay,
that's my answer.
All right. So when Jacob steals Esau's blessing, the funny thing is, I don't even think he was thinking about it, but his mom Rebecca was like, "Do it."
He was thinking about it.
He was thinking about it, but his mom, Rebecca pushed him towards it. And they kind of schemed against us together. But I think Rebecca did that because what she heard from the Lord, like, I don't know, Jacob is special. Maybe this is what requires, but she shouldn't have done it and been deceptive in that way. And sometimes
Yeah.
we do that, and we gotta let God take care of things, but we want things done on our own.
Yeah.
And it goes back to how our makeup is, and I'm gonna continuously say this is how we eat the fruits. We're gonna continue to do this. All
Mm.
right.
Yeah.
So Jacob's ladder, I said it. He talked to God. It was very interesting. He saw God and his angels on the steps
Mm-hmm.
of heaven, which is back then. I mean, it, man, any time is phenomenal to talk to God. So that's just awesome. And man, the whole Leah and Rachel thing, like you said this, and I have to give you credit when you are deceptive. Now, this is a learned behavior from Jacob through his mom,
Mm.
who learned it through Isaac, who learned it
Oh wow, you put that together. Okay.
through Abraham.
Yeah. Yeah, so let me say
learned,
this because let me break that down for a second.
yeah,
We're saying we're taking that deception gene back, right?
yeah,
Because or the
it's a
exposure to
learned
it.
behavior.
The so we all know that Abraham, even though he was like good and he walked with God and he was blessed, he would lie to people and say that his wife was actually his sister.
Yeah,
So then later on, Isaac does the same thing
yeah,
about Rebecca, which is crazy. And he did it to Abimelech.
did it to
It
Abimelech.
was wild. So then with James's theory here, it's like, oh, she learned how to be deceptive from watching her husband, Isaac. This is Rebecca, right? And then Rebecca teaches Jacob how to be deceptive by scheming
Yeah,
about the blessing.
yeah,
Jacob was already, well, I can't even really say he was deceptive. He actually said to his brother
yeah,
about the birthright thing. He was
yeah,
like, give me your birthright. So that wasn't necessarily deceptive. It
yeah.
wasn't
He kind
like
of
kind or nice, I guess. But
yeah,
anyway, he kind of conned him. So anyway,
swindled him, whatever.
wow. So you're saying
Yeah,
all the way back through, you're
just
just
learn.
tracing it to learn
Just
behavior.
learn behavior.
Wow.
Which goes back to what
That's wild.
we do, what our parents do, without even noticing that we do it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just that. So I put it together because you. So shout out to you. All right. So now
Oh.
Jacob meets Laban. He marries Rachel. Puts in 7 years. Then Laban is. I got this from Grace. I put Grace on that word. Help me put together this thing. Well, no, actually, you did, and then Grace was. I was like, man, Faith just said the same thing. So Laban got Leah, swindled Jacob. Now he has
Right.
Jacob for 14 years. Then you gotta remember, add on, he worked for him like another 10 years or something like that, and he changed his wages, or he stayed there for, it was
Yeah.
almost like 20 years.
It was 20 years that he was there, they said in totality, but it was a lot of stuff. Even beyond that,
Man,
it was like
the
he was getting
flocks.
swindled. Yeah, with the flocks. So Laban ended up saying, "Oh yeah, you can have some of my flocks," uh, and and
Yeah,
and I think it was actually Jacob who came up with it. He was like, "I'll just take the ones that are speckled and streaked."
yeah,
So they were like, "Oh, okay, sure, it was a deal." And then when Jacob wasn't looking, Laban went out and took all of the ones that were speckled and streaked. So
yeah,
then there was nothing left for Jacob. So Jacob actually went and had them breed, and he was just trying his luck, and God blessed him, and all of the
yeah,
offspring was speckled or streaked. And it was because I picked up that it was
yes,
because Jacob was blessed. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Even though he went and schemed earlier on,
yeah.
here he is working hard. And just to your
He
point that you
worked
were just
hard.
pointing out, he's working hard for Leah and trying to get Rachel. And then it's honestly really interesting to me how he left his land. Actually, it was on a suggestion from his mom, because she was like, "Oh, Esau's so angry at what we
Yeah, he's
did
not kidding.
and what you
She
did.
wants to kill
You
you.
know, he's talking about killing you. You should go." So even if he wanted to go home, now Jacob is here working for to the marriage of Rachel, gets Leah, then ends up still working for Rachel. Now he's here, even if he wanted to go home, right? He can't really go home because he's starting his life here. So, and it's based off of the fact that he was deceitful. So, but isn't it interesting that he's getting what he did? Right now, someone's deceiving him. I think it's interesting because we were talking about what you attract. And sometimes, I'm not saying this is definitive, but this is my take on it. When you put something out there, then it comes back to you in a different way. And it's like you can't even really be mad because that's what you did. Right? So he deceived his brother, and now he's over here being deceived by someone else.
Didn't even notice it.
But he's still being blessed.
He's still being blessed.
That's how good God is, man.
Yeah.
That's
So
sorry.
what
Go ahead and answer. What in your life requires patience? Certainly not I.
Just like you said a lot, but the lesson that I learned last week was just like you. I need patience with myself.
Mm.
Not only how hard I want. Okay, I want it all, guys. Right? I want a lot of things in my life, but I have to realize that everybody needs patience because it is required. And it's so hard to do, especially nowadays where we are exposed to so much social media streaming where there are people, there's nothing wrong with this, that have lives, right? That we want, and some are honest and some are not.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't know because on social media you see it so much. Whether it's on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, right? Snapchat, I'm probably missing a few, Twitch. Everything is streaming, everything is live, everything is instantaneously. It's like you forget sometimes how hard it is to remodel a house or to you're not baking a cake in a microwave, guys. You gotta make it from scratch. And sometimes I forget because everything technology is so fast.
Yeah.
That it's like, oh, it's not gonna take me this long to get it. When in actuality it is. So that's why you have to take one day at a time and get better every day. Be grateful for God every day.
Yeah.
And then, but that's difficult to do, especially in the world where it's just everything is thrown at you, right? I grew up at a time, I'm about to be 40, so I grew up in a time where you had to go outside and no cell phones. Now it's like you got 5 devices up.
Yeah.
There's 3 screens, 3, 4 screens, and we get stuff done quicker. But it's more out there to learn, and then that to me is harder to be patient nowadays than it was back then because of exposure. So this is what I'm learning when I read the Bible about patience. It's a very, I think, difficult skill to acquire.
Wow.
And it takes time. So.
No, I love the way that you put it as a skill.
Yeah.
Right? Because sometimes it's easy to be thinking of something patience when they say it's a virtue. I don't even really know what that means, but it's a possession. It's something that you have access to, and I didn't even think of it like a skill, like a muscle. Yeah. Right? You're building your patience. You're building your patience muscle. Yeah. And so that makes it even more intriguing to me because it's like, oh yeah, I'm just working on this muscle. Yes. Right? Every opportunity to be patient is just, oh, I'm just working on this muscle, just like you want to work on your abs or your biceps or something.
It's a Bible verse I have up there where it says, that God will give you everything you write down. But also,
Oh, Habakkuk.
yes, but also you need patience and time to acquire it. So,
Yeah, though it may tarry. I know what
yeah,
you're talking about. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So,
Write it down and make it plain.
yes,
And though it may tarry, meaning even though you gotta wait for it.
yes.
Right, right, right.
So the Bible talks about patience all the time. God doesn't work on our time. Their time
Oh man.
is time is to God. There is time. He is a a being that has created time. Do you understand? He doesn't. God doesn't matter to him. And the only thing that matters to him is if we do His will, and that requires patience from everybody. All the stories I've read in the Bible require. If from Just think about it. To this story, even to this story, Jacob worked 20 years for somebody. That's patience, right? Noah had to have patience.
Yeah.
Abraham and Sarah had to have patience.
Yes.
It's so those are Job,
Oh
patience.
yes.
So I think
Yes.
this is a skill, but it's so hard because we are on our own time and not God's. God time doesn't
Mm.
exist to God. God's just like, do what I say. Don't worry about how long it takes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a word, guys. Let me drop the mic.
Trust in me. So
Yeah.
that was kind of speaking to the point that I was thinking, right?
Yeah.
It requires patience, and by going along and being patient, you're showing your trust.
Mm-hmm.
You're showing your trust in God.
Yeah.
We see over and over again, which just brings up a funny thing I'm about to say too.
Mm-hmm.
We see over and over again from what we've read so far that a lot of these people didn't have patience, right?
Mm-hmm.
They went ahead and did what they thought they needed to do, right?
Yeah.
So we think about not even necessarily Job. He was like complaining because he was like really in
Job
pain.
might have had a lot of Job,
But
had a
he
lot of
probably had
patience,
the most
though.
patience I
He
really
probably
think
had
about.
the most patience.
But we think about Abraham and Sarah, right? Who didn't have patience, and they were like, Sarah was just like, oh, have it on with my maid, and then you'll be pregnant, right? And that wasn't God's direction to them. So it's like, okay, you just getting impatient. And the same thing with, Isaac and Rebecca did have patience in the way of their sons, because he went and prayed for them and God granted them twins. But then you look at Jacob and Rebecca, right, not being patient, the mom and son,
Yep.
saying, oh, we're going to scheme on your dad so you can get the blessing. It's like, well, maybe you would have gotten a blessing later down the road,
right?
if you wouldn't have took things here on. So that's interesting. So yeah, and my whole point was that Jacob finds himself in that same predicament when he's dealing with Laban and his daughters, because now he's interfacing with someone who's scheming on him.
Yeah.
Right?
Doesn't
Based off of him being impatient before, now he has to be patient.
Yep.
Right? So that's interesting. Also, whoever said that the Bible was not riveting was wrong. I don't know where I got this idea that, I guess it was just overwhelming or something, like, oh yeah, I need to read. I mean, let me tell you something. The Bible is riveting. The stories that are happening in here are so beyond your imagination. It's not boring at all. No. It's literally life. It's, in addition to them being really interesting and action-packed stories, it's so wild to connect with these people. I thought to myself the other day, what would it say, these little breakdowns they have, like, what would it say about me if I were in the Bible? Right? Because we don't know. We could be, look, all of us could be in the Bible one day. We don't know what's going to happen, but what would that breakdown say about me?
I don't know.
Right? I was like, ugh. Because they break down the strengths and accomplishments and the weaknesses.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, it took her a long time to finally be obedient. Man, that's what it would say. It would be like, she was,
it would probably say,
wow, and she was, yeah, I ain't gonna say what it would say, but because I don't really know. I'm just thinking about it, because like, these people don't know. They're just living their lives. They don't know they're going to be in the Bible one day. I don't think. The closest we get to it is when God is coming and saying, I'm going to make nations out of you, right? When he told Abraham, like, he's going to make his name great. But you didn't necessarily know that people were gonna know about all your
right.
dirt too.
Yeah. Like, I'm gonna make you nations, and Abraham is his bloodline is historic, right? And Abraham is still looked upon, right? And his bloodline is still looked upon, but people say, "Oh man, Abraham," but Abraham was deceptive, right? He told people that, "Hey, this is my sister. It was his wife." He tried to give them to kings.
He had sex with his wife's servant.
He had sex with
but
his
you know,
wife's servant.
interestingly
But
enough,
they were like, "We need a child," and God was like, "I told you to wait," you know, and your child ended up being Isaac, who, you know, gave birth to Jacob. So it's just listen to God when He says He's going to give you many nations, but it's hard as humans.
It's hard, and they. I just want to point out again that they still got blessed.
They still
even though they
blessed,
were deceptive and they had their flaws and they had their things, God still blessed them.
Yeah,
you know. And the one that we talked about, Job, who was the most patient, I would have so far that I could see, right? He was probably blessed. You know what I mean? Even more so, they say he had tenfold, right?
Yeah.
So,
tenfold.
Anyway, moving right along.
Yeah, let's get to Genesis 30 to 31. Jacob has more children. Jacob deceives father-in-law, and then Jacob leaves the father-in-law. So that's what happened between 30 and 31. Shout out, Joseph is born. I think he has a story.
Yeah, he does.
Up. Yeah. So Joseph is born in Genesis 30. I wrote that in my notes. So yeah, Jacob has a lot of kids. That's
bunches of kids.
Yeah.
Do you want to say how that happened?
Yeah. We could talk about that. I mean, it's important. It's in there.
Okay, do you want me to say it?
We can flow off each other.
I talked about it a little bit. Yeah, for sure. But Leah and Rachel were sisters, and they kind of got competitive somewhere in there.
Rachel could not have kids, by the way.
Right, at first.
At first, yes.
And Leah was having kids, and she wanted to have Jacob's kids because she wanted him to love her.
Man,
I was telling James, which he didn't know. I was like, that's a known reason. Sometimes people do that. People will, I don't want to say trap, but sometimes people have kids in order to trying to keep their marriage or keep their relationship, or sometimes if they're not married, it's like people have children. I mean, I don't know anybody that has done that, but it's a thing. I know it's a thing that people will do. So he was talking about that.
Because Leah was like, if I have this child or son, Jacob will love me. That's still going on to this day, guys. We keep.
It's so interesting how we have so much in common. We're just humans, you know. We're having these same issues, and then the kind of like the conflict between the sisters. It kind of reminded me of that song, "He's Mine" by Moke and Steph. It's like they fighting over him. They're both married to him and they're sisters. It's not something that happens common days that much, I would think, other than on the Sister Wives. But it was interesting how they went back and forth. So Leah was having children. Rachel was at first, and there was this whole situation where Rachel wanted something that.
Are you gonna say the maid thing? Here we go.
Here we go with the maid things, man. I would have hated to have been a maid back in that day. You just had to do this that they told you to do, like, oh, go, sleep with my husband. No, what are you talking about? I'm out of here. But that's just how things were going back then, I'm sure. So Rachel there was one point where they were just passing Jacob off.
Yeah.
Like he was just a piece of meat. Like, I promised Leah that you would go be with her tonight. So
the flowers.
I got something right. Thanks. Wow. Go be with her. And so then she conceived again. Leah conceived again. And then because Rachel was so, I guess they were competing with one another. She was like, and she wanted a child, she made her maid have relations with Jacob so that she could have a child. So then she took the child, I suppose, from them. I don't know if they did that. Let me not put that in there because I don't know. But she was having her maids be with her husband so that they could bear children. And it was even this weird part where she was like, I'll have my maid sit on my lap while she has birth so I could like she could feel like she was having a child. I was like, that's a messy scenario there. Yeah. I can't really imagine, nor do I want to. But then Rachel, okay, so then Leah gets competitive too, and then she has her maids have children from Jacob, right? So they're going back and forth, and then eventually Rachel does conceive, and Leah conceives again too. So that's how Jacob ends up with all of these children, right? He has kids from Rachel, he has kids from Leah, he has kids from the maidservants of each of them. He has
a daughter too. He has like 12 sons and a daughter.
Yeah, so he has all of these sons and daughters, and
one daughter.
Oh, sorry. He only had one?
Yeah,
I didn't recognize that.
Daughter.
So he had a bunch of sons and one daughter.
We'll talk about
that. We figured out how that went.
He deceives the father-in-law, remember?
Right. So then he was like, we're going to get out of here.
And I think that happened because Jacob was listening to Laban's sons. And Jacob was like, all right, we got to get out of here. So he kind of like, I wonder if that saying comes from here.
What?
Move like a thief in the night, because that's what Jacob did.
Well, right? Yeah, but he wasn't a thief. He wasn't a thief.
He just he took all his stuff. He took all his what was owed to him.
He had a thief on his squad.
Yeah.
Again, this is what I'm saying. Yeah. You're attracting what you have put out there. It's so interesting to me how this works because he deceived and then he became attracted to Rachel, who was actually Laban's daughter, and Laban deceived. So it's like he attracted this deception into. That's how I think. Yeah. But I mean, I could be wrong. Seems like he attracted this, and then Rachel ended up kind of being deceiving as well. When you say thief in the night, that's what that makes me remind. That's what reminds me.
Now you're talking about
later on. So it's like, was Jacob right to deceive Laban? And what would you have done in this situation? How would you have handled it? I mean, no, it's obvious that he wasn't right, but would I have done that? Possibly, because here you have a person who's not giving you a fair shake. Yeah. Okay. For 20 years. I'm gonna go ahead and say yes. I would have handled it just like that. Yeah. He's not gonna give you a fair shake. If you say to him, "Oh, I think I want to leave," we know Laban wants to have his daughters around him, and we know that everyone knows that Jacob is blessed. He's from a blessed lineage, so they want to be around him and receive by default some of his blessings. Yeah. Here's why I'm going to say this. I'm going to skip way ahead in history here and say, unfortunately, and it's not like he was disobeying the Lord. He was just deceiving Laban, which it doesn't sound great, but I'm just going to be honest. I would have done the same thing because you can't trust Laban. Like, what's he going to say? Oh yeah, you can leave. Take my daughters with you. I don't think that would have worked out like that. And that's what I'm saying. I'm going to fast forward all the way over in history to one of my favorite people, Harriet Tubman. She escaped, okay? She got out of there, walked from Maryland to Pennsylvania because she knew that she wasn't getting ready to have it out in a way where it's like, I'd like to have my freedom, please. So I think he was in a situation not similar to that. I don't think he was a slave, but he was thinking about his own freedom and his own livelihood. He's like, I want to get out of here. You know what I mean? So he took it upon himself. So yeah, I would have handled it like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that. So you hit on a couple things. I think we could definitely talk about. Rachel did steal from her father. Mm-hmm. The idols.
Yes.
Which we learned later was gods, I'm assuming. Because Laban...
Yeah, I guess...
Laban had a different god than Jacob. And this happens, and it's still happening to this day. This is real, where people worship idols or other beings. They don't worship God. So Laban says, somebody stole my gods. Well, Laban catches back up with Jacob. Okay? Laban finds him. And he asked him, why'd you leave? Jacob was like, well, what do you think why I left? Like, you've been working me for 20 years. You've changed my pay twice.
10 times,
10 times.
Something
10
like
times.
that.
I'm sorry. You paid my pay 10 times. Right? I've been here 20 years. It was supposed to be 7. Then it was 14. Then it was another 7. I've been here 20 years. You changed my pay 10 times. Then he talks about how you took the speckled. And,
Right, he did that
like, come
whole
on,
thing.
man.
Come on, man, I can't
I
trust
can't
you.
trust you. But then he was like, okay, I get that. But why did you steal my gods? And then we realized that people, because Laban said, your God came to me in a dream. And
Mm-hmm.
this is a key moment, I think, that we have to realize that, and it's still going to this day, people don't believe the same God that's in this Bible.
Mm.
And when he says, your God, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, that's the God that we believe in. I know I believe in him. Faith believes in him. We
Mm-hmm.
also believe Jesus Christ died on our sins, Lord and Savior. Shout out Jesus. So, but people don't believe in God. Not surprising or not. So it was just interesting how, once again, that's still happening to this day.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting. So, like, once again, people aren't believing in God, the God that's in this Bible, the God that we pray to. He was mad that Rachel stole his God that he prays to.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Well, so that was the thing that was different too in our Bibles,
Yeah.
is that mine said
Things, right?
yours said idols, mine
Yeah.
said gods, and then later it said goods. I was really looking for
Yeah.
that too, because I was like, what did she steal? Right?
Because he was
And
hot.
why did she steal it?
Yeah, that was weird.
We didn't get into that. I don't really know the answer to that. But what I did want to mention is that it's not even that I believe, it's not even that people don't believe in the same God, because these people like Laban are being visited in their dreams
He was.
by God, and they're respecting him, they fear him, right? They're just not serving him. They're not the ones that are, they keep saying, your God, your God. It's like, I don't know what they're doing, but they're not serving him. And it reminds me of this movie that we just recently saw where it was basically the end of the world. And at the end of the world, people don't know what to do. I would imagine, I mean, I don't know what I would do either, but I would be praying. I do know what to do. So what's funny is people who don't necessarily serve God, nothing wrong. I don't say nothing wrong with that, but no judgment. I'm just saying that in this movie specifically, and I've seen this happen in a few movies and in a few scenarios, actually in real life, where it's like they don't pray, but they want you to pray for them. So it's like, oh, it's in the specific movie that I'm talking about, it's the end of the world, and they're like, what do we do? And they're like, you know how to pray for us all. Right? And I mean, it was not like a tear-jerking movie, but that made me cry in the movie. I wasn't booing, but it brought a tear to my eye because I was like, wow, God uses all of us. It's really interesting. But another movie that I'm thinking of in my mind where that happened, it was the first movie that I had seen, the scary movie, that somebody actually prayed. And that person didn't die in the film, which I was like, that's interesting. It's one of the people we were mentioning in our top actresses last night. Anyway, I won't even mention the movie. Maybe that'll be our question. Figure out if you can.
Yeah, scary movie that pray. All right,
okay. So anyway, my point is, yes, you've seen it.
All right, well, I see all.
Okay,
I like all that.
My
Don't
point is,
this
is interesting because when we think about people who might not believe in God, right? They certainly recognize him. It's very interesting to me when people say, "Oh, I'm not this," or "I'm not religious." Like, that's fine. There's so many words that mean different things to different people.
Yeah.
But it's so interesting to me when people say, even when people say they don't believe in God, right? But then you're referencing him as God. So you obviously believe that he exists because you're referencing him. Okay? Like, maybe you don't believe God, died for you, and maybe you don't believe that he's going to help you in this life, right? Maybe that's what you don't believe, but it's almost impossible for me to take in that someone doesn't believe in God. because you're referencing him with a name. And when people say God, you know exactly what they're talking about. So it's, you know what I
Yeah,
mean. So that's just always something that just
they
strikes
do.
me as interesting. But
Yeah, I would have
sorry,
done it.
you would have done what Jacob
Yeah, I
did.
mean, I feel like 90% of people would have. I mean, it's hard not to do what Jacob did when. I mean, it's time and time and time again.
Mm-hmm.
This person has swindled me, promised me, and promised and promised and promised. It's like I gotta get out of here, man.
Yeah,
It's just like, listen, you. It's just having a job that you worked 20 years and they keep promising you, and you're like, I gotta get out of here. I
I
gotta
gotta get out
leave.
of here.
Or just even if it's not 20 years, even if it's 5, and it's just like they keep saying, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying my opinion is I don't. I think he had to, and he had to go home. Now let's lead into that. All
Yeah.
right.
Oh, yeah.
Verses 32 to 34, a lot happens. So Jacob and Laban, they're done. They're cool. As long as Jacob respects his daughters, of course he is. He's been
Mm-hmm.
doing that. And respects his grandkids. They make peace. They do it in front of God. They're good, right? So in 32 and 34, Jacob prepares to meet Esau. Jacob is renamed Israel. Jacob meets
Mm.
Esau, and then Jacob's daughters attack. So that's a lot, but it's not, I guess. Okay, so we'll go into it. So the first thing is, because Jacob had to flee Laban, he has to go home. God tells him go home.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Go
he's like,
home.
oh, home.
Yeah.
Home is where Esau wants to kill me.
Right. Or that's what he remembers.
That's what
Right.
he remembers.
Now it's been 20 years.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's where you left it.
that's where you left it. And now Esau finds out, and Esau has 400 men. That's a lot of guys.
That is, and I gotta say that would be a little concerning to me also, because what happened was they started on their journey,
Yeah.
and after Laban came and caught up with them, and they had their whole covenant and everything,
Yeah.
Jacob went on and he sent some of his folks, like his servants or whatever, out to meet Esau and say, "Hey, Jacob's coming. How do you feel about that?" You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the servant comes back and is like, oh, he's coming to meet you and he's bringing 400 of his boys.
Yeah.
Like, 400?
400.
What you need that many people for? I would definitely be concerned.
Yeah.
Especially the way that they left things.
And so then Jacob divides.
Right. You want me to speak about that?
Yeah.
So then Jacob says, oh, they're coming with 400? All right, we got to split up. Right? He split them up in a couple of times, I think, if I recall correctly. But he basically was like, we shouldn't. I'm thinking he was thinking, if they trying to come for us and destroy us and kill us, then let's give some of us a chance to survive, right? So at one point he had split up his livestock and his servants, and he had split the women up, right, with the kids. And then at some point he decided, let me send ahead, let me take out a portion of what I have as a gift to Esau. It's an offering, as a, that they call it now, an olive branch, to say, hey, here's my gift to you because of what our situation was before.
Yeah.
So I thought it was interesting that he split up so many times because, again, it spoke to me. My takeaway from it was that even though God was telling him to go back, he still wasn't fully trusting in God.
Yeah.
I get where you want to protect your own, right? But it's just another example of how if God told you to do something and you're doing something slightly different, right? You're doing it differently. You're not trusting that God's direction to you is something that he's going to cover you with. And I'm guilty of this, so I'm not saying it in judgment. I'm just saying this is an example of it.
Yeah, so I'm going to lead right into it. I agree with everything you said. I think that it was cowardly. But I say that saying, "What 400 men? You don't know what you're gonna do. When you
Mm-hmm.
know this guy wants to kill you, you're like, oh my god, my brother wants to kill these 400 men. That's a lot of men. It's like a small army.
Yeah.
That's a lot of guys. So, and Jacob sends everybody, splits everybody up, and then he is left alone. And
Mm.
a man wrestles with him, breaking the day. And
At night.
this is at night. Yes, this is in Genesis 32,
Let me bring my.
verse 24 through let's say 29. I'm going to read it. Then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of the day. Now, when he saw that it did not prevail against him, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, "Let me go, for the day breaks." But he said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" He said, "Jacob." And he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. For you have struggled with God, and with men you have prevailed." And Jacob asked, saying, "Tell me your name, I pray." He said, "Why is it you ask about my name?" And he blessed him there. So, we were reading it, and this is about listening to me. This is about what we do every day when God tells you to do something.
Mm.
You need to do it. The being was, and I guess we finally interpreted it was God.
I interpreted it differently, I think. Wait, tell me which verse that was again that you just read.
Genesis 32, verse 24 to 29.
Right. No, I didn't. I didn't. Excuse me. I didn't interpret it differently.
Yeah.
I just took away something specific that it didn't necessarily say here. So I just like to
Yeah.
be very
Yeah.
open about that because it's not what I read. It's what I read and then deduced, took
Yeah.
away. Oh, it's interesting that this.
Because you got to think, right? Sometimes, this is the key saying. He was like, "For you have struggled with God, and with men you have prevailed." Like, we do this. God tells us to do something, and we always question God.
Right.
Well, why? That doesn't make sense, or I can't do that. God didn't say. He said, "Go home."
Yeah, I was good. I was getting ready to bring that up.
He didn't say, "Divide your men and do." Go home. I got you. You don't need to.
The
Oh,
Lord said to him,
yeah.
"Return to your country, and I will make you prosper." I think that's what he said. This is Jacob saying it in 32:9, but he said it before then.
Also, he did say this. You're right. He prayed to God in 32:9, and he said, "You said that you were going to protect me, and I think that's why it came to fruition." God's like, "Just listen to me. Just go home."
I
man.
found it. It's in Genesis 31:3.
Yeah.
Then the Lord said to Jacob, "Return to the land of your fathers, to your people, and I will be with you."
Yes.
So here we are. You get a direct statement, a direct direction from God. And then he gets to one point and he's saying, his servant comes back and says, "I went to meet your brother Esau." This is in 32:6. Genesis 32:6. Mm-hmm. And now he's coming to meet you with 400 men. Now in 32:7, he says, Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided those who were with him. That's not what God said to do, right? It's like going back to Adam and Eve when he told them to be fruitful and multiply. Now they're over here weaving together stuff to put on their bodies to cover themselves because they
I
find out
didn't tell you to
they're
eat the
naked,
fruit.
right? It's like that's not what God told you to do. So God told him, Jacob, to go back to his people, and God would be with him.
Yeah.
Jacob is over here dividing his team, and you know what I mean? That's not what the instruction was. So what I took away from this with the wrestling part, right? So in 32:24, we were just reading,
Yeah.
Jacob was left alone, and a man came and wrestled with him until daybreak. What I got from that is so interesting how we wrestle in our sleep with our own, say, demons, right? The things that keep us up at night. And when we pray to God and he tells us, okay, here's what I want you to do, or sometimes just trust in him, right?
Yeah.
And we're still up wrestling with our
Yeah.
thoughts, with our demons. That's what I kind of took away from it. And he even says in here at one point in 32:26, let me go for day is breaking. it's like
Yeah.
it's like I didn't even get no sleep. Please. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
he's wrestling with God, right?
Yes.
Well, because that's not what it said in mine. It said he was wrestling with a man, and so the significance of
I was
that,
like, what?
it's like, what? Some dude came and started wrestling him.
Israel?
At first, I was like, is it from Esau's
Yeah.
camp or whatever? But he was alone, and he was wrestling with God. It comes out to us, and it makes sense because it's like you're wrestling with God's direction.
Yeah.
God's telling you, go home and be with your people. You're over here doing something different that I didn't tell you to do. And so you're wrestling. You're wrestling with your own interpretation of what you think you should do and what God told you to do.
Yeah.
And something happened to his hip after that.
It probably
popped out of the socket.
Yeah.
So that was interesting.
Yeah.
Sorry, I went on a tangent.
So
I felt like
no, that was good. And then, but after that, he changed, and he got everybody together, and he came out to the front to meet Esau.
Yeah,
which of course, if you wrestle with God, you're thinking a bit differently. And then Esau cries, and they forgive each other. And that's the question, right? Do you find Esau's response to Jacob surprising? When I read it, I guess we were kind of surprised. But, I mean, 20 years is a long time without your brother, and that's some time for forgiveness.
Yeah, it is.
I think the 400 men were just like, look what I have. We could, we're blessed.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't necessarily surprised.
Yeah,
but I was like on the edge of my seat trying to figure out what was happening with these 400 men he was bringing.
Yeah.
But I still felt like, obviously, we're not finished the story. And then even with that, Jacob kind of is deceptive again because he tells his brother Esau, oh, we have these young ones and we're just going to take a long time to get there. We have young animals and we have young children.
Yep.
So we're not going to want to like charge ahead, right? So we're just going to take our time and get there. He told his brother that. He did not mention to his brother that he was going to go north for a little bit and set up shop there. And so I'm not saying that he lied to him. He didn't tell him he wasn't going to go, but what he told him was different from what he did immediately after that. So I just thought that was interesting because if you just made up with somebody that you deceived a long time ago, right? Like, it's probably not a good idea.
Cool, I'm out.
To keep on deceiving them. But I don't know what that was for, right? So he could have all good intentions and all that stuff, and maybe he just didn't want to tell him all his business. Who knows? Yeah. But I'm just kind of looking at the side eye because why didn't you say that when that wasn't your immediate action after? It just seems like it wasn't their intention.
That's perfect because that leads us to the story that we just heard. So in 34, Jacob has a daughter named Dinah, and
right, he already had this daughter. He didn't have her then,
he didn't have
but
her
she
then,
was of
She gets attacked and violated by Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, and Shechem is like, well, I love her, and want to be with her, and he goes back to
His father,
his
Hamor.
father, Jacob.
Oh wait,
no, he goes back to this. Jacob heard what happened to his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Now his sons were. Jacob was like, "I'm gonna be at peace until I hear what happens." Now his sons were in the field, and Shechem and his father Hamor came to them, and they said that this Jacob's sons said, "Hey, yeah, cool. You know what? We're going to actually Faith pick this up. I'm going to let her pick it up right after this." So Hamor, Shechem and Hamor. So Jacob's sons, the two sons were named Simeon and Levi. They told Shechem and Hamor, "Hey, listen, man, you're not circumcised. Get circumcised. Everybody, your father, you, all the men, and you could be with our daughter. You could be with our sister, and then we will take your daughters, and we'll become one nation."
Mm-hmm.
And after that, while Hamor and Shechem were excited, and they were like, "Yes, yes, we get to combine." All the men circumcised themselves, and this has to hurt. I don't know, but I can probably tell you, if you're uncircumcised as an adult, and you do it yourself. Back then, there are no painkillers.
I don't know how they did that. They must have been drinking a lot of wine.
I don't know, man. I think they just did it, and while they were in pain, Simeon and Levi came through and killed all the men in the village for raping. It says violated in the Bible. For Shechem violating their sister Dinah, they came through and pillaged, killed all the men. They killed Shechem, and with Shechem and Hamor, they killed them with the edge of their sword, and they pillaged the town and took the daughters and sons. Jacob wasn't happy.
Yeah, because you're starting stuff. Now I gotta be known as the guy who let his sons do this. But then again, listen to this, because I'm not saying he's responsible for his sons, what they did, but it's interesting that this deceitfulness shows up again. Right? They basically, the sons acted like they were cool, like, "Oh yeah, you raped our sister. It's fine. We can go and move past this as long as you all just get circumcised." And I couldn't figure out why they would make them do that first. I guess it was so they could be unsuspecting. Like, yeah, the only problem we have is that you guys need to get circumcised. It's just not right. And so if you'll do that, then you see how rich we are.
But go ahead. Remember, you pointed this out, because in my Bible, it said they spoke deceitfully. Genesis 34, verse 13. What's it say?
It says, Jacob's sons answered Shechem and Hamor his father deceitfully, because Shechem had defiled and disgraced their sister Dinah.
Yeah.
They said to them, "We cannot do this thing and give our sister to you in marriage, because you're not circumcised. It would be a disgrace to us."
Yep.
Right? So they deceitfully said this.
Yeah.
And I wondered at that point, before we read further, how did they deceitfully say this? What does that actually mean later? How are they not gonna? I was thinking, they're just gonna make everybody get circumcised, which is a major inconvenience, right? They're just gonna make everybody get circumcised, and then they're gonna roll out. Hard. That's what I thought. Because you gotta think, if you had to go back to your people and say, "Hey, listen, guys, we gotta do this one thing," right? It's like having to do with that. It would be a hard sell. Yes. I would think, but I guess they leveraged, because they're like, look at how much that they have. They have all of these animals, and they're rich, so they're blessed. Let's go and be one with them, so we'll all get circumcised. And instead of them, which I thought they were just going to say that and then leave, instead of that happening, they killed them. They killed them while they were recovering from their circumcisions. So I can only imagine they were too weak to fight or something. Like, you're just
Yeah, I could
right?
definitely
Or what, like
imagine
you
that.
said,
That's a
whatever they
very
were
sensitive
using,
area.
whatever they were using to recover from their pain. Which I just made that up, but I'm thinking they probably
They
had
were
to
in
be
pain.
drinking wine or
Oh yeah,
something
yeah, yeah,
to just deal with the pain. So I just think that was horrible, right? You just killed all those people. So Jacob was upset because he's like, oh, you've ruined me. That's what he
yeah.
said.
Yeah.
You've made me a stench to the inhabitants of the land.
Yeah. I mean, it's a part of his
My
legacy.
men are few in number, and the men of the land will band together against me and
Yeah.
attack me.
I mean,
I shall be destroyed, I
yeah.
and my household.
I mean, look. We're reading. This is a part of his legacy.
That's wild, and it's like,
Like, been through all this,
mm,
guys. And Jacob's not like that. He's not.
yeah.
He's a peaceful.
He doesn't seem like a fighter. Like,
No,
he's a
he,
deceitful.
yeah,
He could be deceitful sometimes, but
yeah.
he's not like a.
He
He
works
doesn't seem
hard.
like a fighter. Yeah,
No,
he
he works
worked that
hard.
land, and
Yeah,
he seems to have in his older age gotten to be more of a walk with God. He's been
yeah.
doing a more walk with God, so it's like for his sons to do
Come
that.
on,
I
man.
can't imagine what would have made them. I mean, they said,
They were
but
mad.
should we be permitted to? Should they be permitted to treat our sisters a prostitute? So
Yeah, they were
basically,
pissed.
they were upset. But that was just a
It was. We
lot.
didn't think that they were gonna go that hard.
Yeah. Yeah, to kill all of them. And I wondered what the significance of the edge of the sword was.
Yeah,
I still didn't find that out.
yeah,
So, yeah, the question for the week.
yeah.
What do you think the significance of this is? Killing someone with the edge of the sword. They saved the edge of the sword specifically for Shechem and Hamor,
Yeah,
right? They killed all these other people, but they specifically said
yeah.
that, which verse was that in? He said,
It,
oh, the 26. It's 34:26. They killed Hamor and his son Shechem with the edge of the sword.
yep. Yeah.
I don't know what that means. What do you guys think that means? Also, just in general, if you guys have any commentary or things that you took away that are interesting to you, we would just love to know what you thought about this particular section of the Bible. It's getting more and more surprising,
Yeah.
right? You think one
Definitely.
thing's going to happen and then something completely out of kilter happens that you weren't even expecting.
Yeah. That's. I mean that one took me off guard. I was like, what? They went from 0 to
What?
100. But listen, I'm not saying that what Shechem and Hamor did to their sister was totally wrong. And even if they dealt with Shechem and Hamor and get it, but they killed
All the innocent, all the people who
all
didn't
the
do
other
anything.
people. Man, that's, oh well, so.
Yeah, so I wanted to say this too. So the major takeaway for me is sort of an applicable way is that I'm seeing the issues that people are having with trusting God and the consequences of not doing that.
Yeah.
Right? When you have, and this for me is sort of how I'm taking it based on my life and how I can apply the word and how it's just jumping out to me. It's not even something I sought to find. But what I'm getting the theme of is this is what happens when God gives you a direction to go in or a thing to complete or an instruction and you don't trust to just follow his word. Right? There's consequences for that. And so we're seeing this play out a few times now where it happened with Adam and Eve. It happened with Abraham.
Yeah.
It happened with now Jacob.
Yeah.
Right? So you're kind of seeing this play out where it's like God told you to do something. You did something else or something that you thought was the best thing to do. And then you're having to suffer through these consequences. And then this other drama just arises out of that. You know what I mean? If you were just doing what you were supposed to be doing, I wonder how it would have been different, right? But God's timing, God's will, God uses everything for our good. It's really, to me, I can't lie. I probably would have made some of these same decisions, especially when they talked about the, deceiving of Laban. I probably wouldn't have done that thing to Esau where I took his birthright and all that. But I see myself in these characters, in these people, just kind of in my own way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, I get it. I mean, takeaways that I got is the small things matter. So the little things that can be passed down from generation to generation is astronomical. Just because Abraham was deceptive, it led to Isaac, Rebecca, Jacob, right? And then Leah and Rachel dealing with, oh, I'll give Leah and Rachel's taking Laban's things, and then their whole interworkings, like, oh, I'll trade you him for Jacob, and that was
Mm-hmm.
to me a little deceptive. And then it related to his sons, and sometimes you have to actions speak louder than words.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then patience. Patience is once again a skill. It's something that the I think is underrated and doesn't get enough attention because it's from what I'm seeing in the early beginnings of the Bible, this is one of the things God requires.
Mm-hmm. Patience and trust.
Patience, trust, obedience.
Mm.
It's like things that he requires. Like, listen, right? So those are the things that I got. And forgiveness, too. Esau forgave.
Mm-hmm.
Jacob, Laban forgave.
Job forgave too
Jacob,
because he ended up having to pray for his friends that
Job
weren't
forgave.
really
And so
supportive.
this is it's great, and I can't wait to read more. So,
Me either.
all right, guys. Once again, we're gonna post a question on Twitter. Please comment, like, and subscribe, and follow us on all platforms. Please
Yes, we're
click
on
the
Facebook, we're on
yes,
Instagram,
yeah,
we're on LinkedIn, we're on
yeah,
Twitter, we're um everywhere, and if we're on TikTok too,
yeah,
even though we got to
we,
get better at that.
yeah,
But let us know where you are,
yeah.
and we want to be there too. And as we always say, don't take our word for it. Go to the source.
Read the
Read the Bible.
Bible.
Read your Bible.
All right, guys. Peace.